read from Psalm 67. It's always kind of a good missions text before we go through a couple of things. Okay, so Psalm 67 is a lot like what Aaron, as the high priest, would say as the blessing to Israel. It seems to have come out of that, but then it has been expanded by the time you get to Psalm 67 to be this kind of global, not just a blessing on Israel and the tribes as they settle into places, but it now kind of looks beyond them as to this whole world belonging to Yahweh. So Psalm 67 goes, "May God be gracious to us and bless us and make his face to shine upon us, that your way may be known on earth, your saving power among all nations. Let the peoples praise you, O God. Let all the peoples praise you. Let the nations be glad and sing for joy, for you judge the peoples with equity and guide the nations upon earth. Let the peoples praise you, O God. Let all the peoples praise you. The earth has yielded its increase. God, our God, shall bless us, and God shall bless us, and let all the ends of the earth fear him." So it's just a great text to kind of pull everything together in thinking about missions. First off, I have 3 books here that I want to give away to whoever might be interested in reading them. So just raise your hand, and sorry if you're 2 hands at once, I'll probably just choose one and move on. You can throw it in the library and tell the other person when you're done with it. The first one is a book on prioritizing the church in missions is the title. It is written by John Fulmar and Scott Logsdon. John Fulmar was part of this ACME. He pastors a church in the UAE. So right there, it's been a hub for sending churches into Iran, Iraq, others, because the UAE has relative freedoms compared to most of the other Middle East. And so this book, it's kind of a defense of how should a church itself, not just individuals, but how should a church try to put missions as a group together. Is anybody interested in possibly reading this? They're all going to end up in Everett's hands if you don't raise your hand, because that's, by default, that's where books go to live. All right, Everett, you might end up with a stack. Okay, the second one. These were just given to us at the conference. I went with Newt, so having 2 in the Anderson household doesn't make sense. That's all right. It's called Your Only Comfort. It is Devotions for Hope in Suffering, and it's a collection of Charles Spurgeon's kind of reflections on walking through suffering, how that impacts thinking about Christ and those things. Jeff Chang is the one who edited it. Dr. Chang is down at Spurgeon College and Midwestern. Faith has already got a hand up, so I'll let you claim it. He runs the Spurgeon Center down at Spurgeon College, Midwestern. He is part of Warnell Road Baptist. He's on the board at ACME, and so Warnell Road and us, as well as a couple other churches in Kansas City, have talked about what does it look like to partner for some projects, missions, those kinds of things within our small area, and so hopefully at some point we'll have Dr. Chang up here talk about things. Yeah, Dan?
I was going to say that I believe that a young lady from here, I forget her name, but she just graduated from Spurgeon a couple of years ago. She lives in a faraway country called Hamilton. I believe she had a hand in editing that particular book.
All right. Well, there we go. Olivia is a rock star. You might find her name inside of it. I mean, whoever this far distant person is. All right. Lastly, they gave us a book called Persecution in Missions, Practical Theology. So it's published under the 9 Marks label, if you know them from Capitol Hill and groups that have developed out of it, by a guy named Matt Rhodes. And it just walks through, if with so many obstacles in missions and so much difficulty in those kinds of things, how do you just practically kind of work out why choose the hard thing, at what level, when, why? It's clear, like you read the First Thessalonians, right? And Paul is just commending them for just getting the tar beat out of them. How do we think about that? And then how do we think about, he comes back to Corinthians later, and he's like, he uses kind of a chiding section, to remind them, like the poor churches in Macedonia up the road, like they're way out giving you. I told them you were going to have a bunch, so let's prep to get ready. So anyway, if somebody interested in something related to persecution and how we put that together with missions. All right, Andrew, we got to take her. All right. Now, so I did this PowerPoint this morning, and I imported it. So you'll probably watch some of the formatting will not be the best. We'll be able to walk through it. So, what is ACME? ACME stands for the Association of Churches for Missions and Evangelism. So it has nothing to do with Wile E. Coyote, nothing to do with Roadrunners, Anvils, anything else. They all recognize that this is what comes with choosing a name. And even the very first conference they had was in New Mexico, and the state bird of New Mexico happens to be the Roadrunner. So they recognize all of the kind of, tidbits that come with it. But what makes ACME slightly different than other missions group is that it's not organized around pastors. It's not pastors joining together for missions. It is actually churches that will have to decide as churches that they want to join and be a part of this fellowship. So at the conference, there were all sorts of just regular church members that were participating within the conference. It's not, obviously there's lots of pastors that are recruiting people to come. Plenty of pastors were there, but there's a bunch. Some churches brought 10, 15 people to this conference. So it's if you have a heart for missions, this is a wide open door. It's not held to just leadership in a church or others. This is a great opportunity. So that's what ACME stands for. Their kind of mission statement exists to unite, mobilize like-minded churches to fund pastors, planters, missionaries, and other projects around the world. So we'll get to where some of that money goes in a second. Okay, imagine a funnel. You know how you've got a funnel for whatever you're going to use it for. You've got a big wide end, right, and you've got a small end. Typically, what's happened in lots of missions agencies over the years is that they will have, everybody agrees we want to do something good for the kingdom. And so lots of Christians will join together, and the output will be, we want to, at the bottom, at the small end, is something good for the kingdom, which is really kind of vague. And so what that has, I think, this is my at least generalization, is what that has led to is a lot of Christians joining together, and the end result looking really confusing and befuddling to kind of what needs to happen for the sake of the gospel. So churches will all join together, and then what will come out is, hey, we should look at this poor region of the world, and we need to help them build wells. We need to help them make sustainable life choices. We need to do those kinds of things. Those are fantastic, but what often gets lost is some of the hardest, slowest work of building churches that will just continually propagate the gospel in those kinds of places. So another instance would be there are some organizations that want to make disciples of Christ. That's even more specific than wells, right? So their good is kind of comes out, gather all sorts of Christians together, make disciples, and their way of doing that ends up being, hey, I'm going to go into a village, I'm going to evangelize until somebody becomes a Christian, and then I will put that person in charge, and I will go off onto the next village. And that's great, you've got a Christian presence in there, but guess what happens? Whether either persecution or difficulty or other things come, oftentimes you go 10 years down the road, and there's nothing left behind because nobody was saying, well, what needs to happen is that person now needs to be trained up, and there needs to be a church put there, and they need pastors, and they need deacons, and they need all the normal things that the New Testament fills out for us. So that kind of real small funnel at the bottom looks like a good thing, but it ends up being kind of confusing and not resulting in long-term healthy churches in different kinds of places. Therefore, Acme, and other organizations, I'm sure will do this, has set the funnel upside down to where what they want to do is they want churches that are so like-minded in how they're thinking about what is the gospel, what is a church, how should we, what kinds of priorities should we have as a church, that would lead to everybody in such agreement that when the funnel gets big out, as you'll see, wherever money goes to, whether it's help with a building or help with kind of getting a program started here or getting this over here, everyone is just like, yeah, that makes sense. That's going to help establish the kind of churches down the road that we'll need in that kind of place in the world or in America or in whatever. So by having that funnel kind of reversed, then there's tons and tons of agreement about what's the central priority, which leads to just a lot of encouragement on wherever that money is going in different ways. So these are the distinctives, especially the ones that they think that come out and kind of help promote what Acme's about. So some of them are related to the church itself. Some are related to kind of how they think about missions. So expositional preaching, right? So that a church believes that whatever the Bible's main message is, on the week in and the week out diet of the saints gathering together, what God says forms everything that a Christian should believe and do and be shaped by. So if God says through Paul's letter to Timothy, this is how a church should be structured, elders, deacons, put these kinds of men in these kinds of places, those kinds of things, it comes out as you go through the letter to 1 Timothy. So expositional preaching just works through book by book, passage by passage, as the regular diet of the church. And that forms, if you assume that's the basis of what a church is going to be teaching, it just automatically shapes all sorts of different directions of where a church is going to head to. Here's this kind of trendy subject that should be dealt with over here. That's great. That's probably got some importance in those things, but we'll eventually get to it if we just keep plugging along with everything that the Word of God tells us. So expositional preaching becomes a distinctive of anyone who wants to join. If you don't talk in those kinds of terms, you're probably a church that doesn't fit. That's been the mainstay. I mean, in Sunday school we watched last week. What was the first thing that Nanette remembered about what this church gathered and what the preaching was? It was immediately start in 1 Corinthians and begin to walk through that passage in the Bible. So expositional preaching. Historic Baptist ecclesiology. So by conviction, we're not Paedo-Baptist. We believe that the members that covenant together are members who have genuinely received the Spirit and professed faith in their Lord. And those are the members who have been baptized. So those churches, when they get to the field, and say money goes to a church planter, and they ask the question, well, what should I do with these converts that I'm making, and what should I do with the little kids that they have? There's already kind of a set place of, well, no, we're promoting churches that understand this understanding of the church, that we baptize those who've already made a profession, and those are the members of the covenant community. All right, Reformed soteriology. So the doctrines of tulip, unconditional election, those things as part of the grouping of how we believe God works in salvation. Meaningful membership and discipline, right? So this is just, I think, outside the bounds of, we believe it in this church, but it's amazing again as you kind of walk through how most churches are kind of organized in those things, that members who covenant together are then responsible for each other's lives and responsible for helping them continue to walk in the faith and work out the one another's that are kind of all throughout the Bible. And so then it's the church's ultimate job, not the elders, but the church as a whole, to be able to say, this person, we've gone to them, we've asked them to change this kind of way of life of what's going on. They continue to refuse to repent, to even show signs of remorse. And so we're walking through, not just to form them only in the good, but then also to say, we can't believe your testimony that you say you're a follower of Christ, but you refuse to repent of this sin. And so that's what happens in Matthew 18:15, right, where someone's put out of the church. So meaningful membership means that our lives are intertwined in these kinds of ways. We've agreed as a church, and then we walk that out together as a body. So we don't do that for, the saints over at Cornerstone. We do that for those of us that have gathered together here and covenanted together as Crosspoint. So meaningful membership and discipline, elder-led congregationalism. So we think that the Bible describes that the churches are supposed to be led by qualified men in those teaching roles, but that the ultimate authority for the church ultimately getting decisions about who is in and who is out, those keys of the kingdom are given to the congregation. So both of these things are meant to work in harmony with one another, but they are put forward as what kind of church, when a planter goes or another church is being formed overseas or a new church plant is being made, what kind of ambition, what kind of church do they think it is? Well, elder-led congregationalism, and maybe we can walk through that sometime next year or something else in Sunday school. If those are new terms for you, on the website, you can see, Alexander even made this point, there are great kind of single paragraph lines about what each of these means and captures quite a bit of the meaning. Next, one unified assembly. All right, so this is in some ways kind of the most strategic in some ways of making a distinction, especially in our current culture. So why have a distinctive about one unified assembly? And that is because there's so much in the New Testament about when the saints gather to make a decision. So you can have a church, right, and you could have multiple services and one pastoral group over those. But how do the saints in the 9 a.m. service and the saints in the 11 a.m. service know enough about each other that when they come together in a congregational meeting, that they can say, okay, like this is the happenings of the church. So this distinctive says the emphasis that what we want is not multi-venues or a great celebrity pastor who can, be on a screen here and here and here and here. But the ambition is to build a single church, and as they gather, they are helping build up that assembly, and they themselves are putting and putting their elders and voting on their elders into place and voting on their deacons into place, and they're responsible for holding them accountable while the leadership is doing the same for the body and teaching well, and all of those kinds of things. So that becomes a huge issue, especially overseas, when you have celebrity pastors in Africa, especially one place, that essentially will be over hundreds of congregations because of their celebrity status. And that's true in Asia as well as true in America. We got plenty of our own celebrity pastors. And this tenet works against that, okay? Biblically ordered worship. So sorry for the jumbled words there. Just that, does God get to tell us how we put this service together today? Does God get a say, or are we just doing what we think, we have a confession of faith and a confession of sin because that's the anti-trendy thing to do. Most churches don't have those, so we'll throw it in because it's actually going to kind of spin things. No. We do it because we think those are either directly given by Scripture, like Paul tells Timothy to read the word out in the body, or they're a natural implication of other things that God describes in his word for how the body should live its life together. We should regularly be confessing our sins, and then hearing, again, the assurance that God gives us in the gospel. Those come up so often as implications, it's like it makes best sense to put that in a service as we worship together. So biblically ordered worship. So the Bible forms and shapes our worship together. And you can see how important that would be, especially if a new church is being formed in a foreign context, especially. And then last, so in line with this book, church-centered missions, that the church is the primary builder, sender of the people to go to different places, and the end goal is churches. The end goal is not a vague kind of, nebulous-shaped Christians in certain places. The goal is churches. The goal is to get them established, planted, and what all of that does is it slows everything down. I mean, it is so kind of against the grain of kind of a quick bake. Hey, we love to see massive conversions, or we love to see high energy, impactful sorts of people doing this work or that work. And when you say the goal is churches, what that means is that you might have to be in a place a really, really long time, because people in that place will need to be trained up to be able to teach the word to somewhere else. I mean, you guys already have some of this DNA in you, because you guys listen when Glenn comes and talks about the slow work of Bible translation. Everyone's like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's what we should do. I mean, building churches is the exact kind of slow, methodical, like, this is what God intends. So however long it takes to see the fruit of a whole church being planted, we're in on that. So you can just tell, when I talk about turning the funnel upside down, missions agencies don't get this restrictive about kind of who they're partnering with. So there are 100 churches right now in Acme that are member churches that have said, yeah, that describes us, and so we can easily partner together. All right. So some of the objectives. So right now, this is year 3 of Acme's existence. It's got the national component, which is what the conference that I've gone to the last few years. The goal is to eventually funnel that down into regional groups. So there's only 100 so far, and they're spread all across the U.S. So the Midwest is got a ridiculous section there in the regional. Like, right, we're probably not getting together with the Michigan churches very frequently, and the Ohio churches, they're off on their own. But it's a starting place with the idea that what happens when somebody from Warnell Road or Summit Baptist down in Kansas City has someone that they're trying to promote, get trained, and other things to get ready to go across and plant a new church in a hard place. And all of a sudden, our relationship with them, because we're in a region with them, and they say, hey, this is somebody we'd like to purposely send up, buys into all of what we're about, and of course, because of the distinctives, buys into everything we're about. Can they come up and let you know what's going on, see if you want to get behind them as well? It'd be like, yeah, let's put them up in front. We don't, the amount of kind of, where's this person coming from? What do they think about this or this or this? Because of the distinctives, means they're already going to be so far along the way with agreement about wanting to make healthy churches across the globe. So hopefully that regional component will eventually even shrink more and more and more, to the point of we can do things with the churches that are down in Kansas City, or there's a few in Illinois, northern Arkansas, some that are looking from Iowa. Riverbend has been looking at some of this, so I know some of the pastors in Kansas City know of Joe Bridgman and Bob, and have had some conversations. So there's things within our region that we could be able to encourage one another and help one another. So that's eventually the dream would be is like every other year you'd have a regional conference and then a national conference, and a regional and a national, and even regionals would have influence in pooling resources and making grants. So here's where Acme is also a little bit different. They what they do for giving money away is all the churches pool their resources together, and they give, essentially at this point, 1-year grants. So we'll see as we walk through a few of those in the booklet there. But they'll take amount of money, and someone will put a grant in, but the grant has to come from member churches. So one of the member churches, who's already been affirmed as believing these distinctives, comes and says, we have this great project going on for this. And they can put a grant together. And of course, if there's multiple member churches that are all say, yeah, we're invested in that too, we love that too, then they put a proposal, and every year right now, there's a grant that is given out in order to help start a project, help finish a project, help get something started in different kinds of ways. So the churches make the grants, which eventually go to missionaries projects. We'll talk about some of those, where they go. So that's how Acme is distributing funds. All right, so first year, 2024, was $300,000 that they gave out to, I think, 30 projects overall. Last year was $500,000, I think is right. And this year we watched as $800,000 went to, I think, 41 or so grants. You can see it's there in the front of the booklet. So with the momentum of more churches joining and those kinds of things, you watch as we sit there on the first night as you know, money goes to this project and that project, and everyone's just, it's amazing situation just watching the money flow to projects. You're like, I could see Crosspoint getting behind that. Oh, yeah, that'd be amazing to be part of, or you know, and on and on and on. All right, so this might interest some of you, but as far as the $800,000, they break it up. About a third is going to things around the U.S., and they spend about 2/3 going to things that are international projects at this point. Okay, these 5 categories right here. This is kind of how they decide. So you'll see this in the booklet on the right side. This is how they divide the categories of where things are going. So there's some funds that go to pastors, some that go to planters or church plants. The next one they call pipelines. So some kind of thing that is going to help build up pastors, or it's going to help put other leaders in positions of getting more training, something that kind of helps get things moving from this stage to this stage. So they call that the pipeline category. Projects is kind of their catch-all. So there's always, the last 3 years, they've always had someone who is doing, say, Reformed publishing, and they want to get some kind of books published in a certain area of the world, and money has gone to kind of help get them started, help get them whatever kind of initial licenses they may need to get things translated, or additional help with editing, or something like that. So projects just kind of ends up being a catch-all category. And then properties, which becomes kind of more fantastic each and every year, because as you watch there's one guy that's been supported a couple of times who's down in Munich, Germany, and the Acme helped support getting a building for him. Now, there are churches everywhere in Munich, Germany, and all of them have pretty well lost the gospel. I mean, he joked in the one time he stood up of like, Operation World says we should have, 0.1% evangelical Christians within Munich. I can't find them. I mean, looking all over, having been there for most of his life, can't find them anywhere. And so all of the work of that church has been people straight just being converted out of a complete atheistic mindset. And so none of the churches that are around will let them rent a space. Like, they just think they're foreigners or a cult or something completely outside of what anything of normal Christianity should look like. And so Acme helps sponsor purchasing a building for them. So they have a church space now. And there's several in there you'll see for similar kinds of things. All right, lastly, on this stuff, before we take a minute and look at some of the grants. Acme redid their website, and I know a lot of you, as you've traveled, you've used things like Founders Ministry or Gospel Coalition. The website has a similar kind of church finder. So if you're traveling throughout the U.S. or whatever, you've got another great resource of a church you know is going to be incredibly like-minded because of those distinctives, of which you can use to find a church in that area where you're at and be able to worship with other saints. So I just wanted to make sure you took notice of that. You can put that as kind of some of the things to take a look at. All right. Does everybody have a booklet? Did you get a little booklet from the stand? They said we could take 25, and I ended up with 75. So there are lots in abundance. Okay. I just want to, these are completely free for you guys to take and look at. On page 3, you can see they marked out a general category of grants under 20,000, grants from 20 to 30,000, and then grants from 30 to 90. So you kind of get an estimate of what kind of pool of resources is going to each one. And then they're broken into different categories. So just turn to page 5, for instance. Here's an example from the pastors. So at the conference, this pastor, Tiago Oliveira, he was there from Portugal. Portugal's a strange country because the Reformation never made it there. So it basically stopped when it got to northern Spain, and there was never any Protestant influence. So First Baptist Church, which in America are often the most oldest historic in a community or whatever, didn't get there till the 1920s. In their capital city, there's no First Baptist until the 20th century. There's no Baptist church at all until basically the 20th century. So this is any sort of Protestant church at all, much less Reformed Baptist is minutia. So this goes for him to be able to. What he was able to do was find another Portuguese-speaking pastor in Brazil who had retired from his pastoral work in Brazil, was able to be transplanted over, and is able to come alongside this guy because he's also running a pastor training center there in Lisbon. And so this is going to allow basically some shared workload for this church to be able to do that and hopefully get some other church plants going in the future, but to support a pastor for this church. So there's an example of pastoral work being funded. Go over to page 7. Church plant in southern Nairobi. So they have given a couple grants to this church, and there's another one. They had given help purchase a property in Nairobi for this church. We actually prayed for it in a Sunday school last year. And that church building, we got to watch as there was some pictures of the completion of this new building to do different centers of work out of it. And so this Emmanuel Baptist Church has planted, I think, 4 or 5 churches in and around the Nairobi area. Now, they've planted more in extended areas throughout Africa or whatever, but they've helped build a training center for Christians, discipleship ministries. The building helped with a huge youth center that they were able to kind of gather people from the community. I mean, Nairobi's huge. I think it's 1 million plus people. It's a huge African city. So this is helping now get another church plant off the ground to go there. You'll notice, if you take this home and you look through it later, there's lots that are pretty generic within the book as far as closed country this. We got tidbits on some of them, not all. So a lot of them end up being pretty generic. Let's see. So there's lots of plants until page 13 where you get to pipelines. Okay, so on page 13, the second one there says cost to train in a closed country Radius staff in Mexico. So Radius is a purposeful missionary training center. So they will bring people down for 1-year, 2-year program. And basically, for people that are going to countries that are closed, that are especially difficult, they will work with them to develop a whole host of skills, both practical ones for living in that kind of environment, as well as some language training, as well as getting, now these are stats that they're presenting at it, but it's something like 7 out of every 10 missionaries that goes to kind of one of the countries they're training for ends up coming home within the first 5 years permanently, done, just because of the exhaustion, the difficulty, those things. And Radius, they're trying not to boast, it's pretty impressive, but we'll say, 9 out of 10 of ours, just because of the training, the sober-mindedness, the evaluation, some of those kinds of things, end up lasting on the field in a way that's longer than that. So it's slowing everything down to say, what does it really require to have a church that's going to plant and last? And so this is a pipeline, and then there's money now. There's another grant in there for them as well to send people from an Acme church who might be interested. So, if we were an Acme church of some kind and we're like, yeah, someone's looking at going over there, what would it require to get prepared? You could apply for that grant, and they could get some additional training or other kinds of things. So pipelines, that's an example of pipelines. All right, turn over a couple more pages. Give you an example from each. There's lots there you can look at. Always feel free to ask me questions if you stumble across one and you want to see. All right, let's see. Okay, page 2024. Let me mention these two. So this is to help do a mission conference in Thailand, to basically where there will be a bunch of Middle Eastern pastors, church people, able to come in and get kind of an intensive couple of days of training, encouragement, those kinds of things. Money is going to help get that conference up and going. So they've had it going for a few years. Thailand, for all of its small percentage of Christians, is one of the most free as far as travel goes. So this allows them to put that conference on. And then right below it, you can see a cross-campus startup costs. So most campus ministries will be kind of only parachurch ministries. So that they will be sometimes disconnected from local churches, and they will just have what happens there with on campus as kind of everything the hub is. Across campus is people who are saying, how do we connect local churches and getting people to see what does it look like to be in a part of the life of a local church? While you look, and we got 6,000, refugees over there on Missouri Western, sitting within our own borders and saying, okay, what are ways that we should try and reach out to that group of people and minister to them, especially or some of them, connect them to local churches, because one of the questions we used to ask, even when people finished up at Missouri Western, was, could you, in your Christian life, end up in Oregon, Missouri, and thrive? Like, is your Christian faith enough that you could be in that place and you would immediately know, I got to go look for expositional preaching, I need to go look for fellowship of people who believe the Bible, I need to go and labor and serve and give my life so that church is built up? Like, can they do that without having their own age group and people all around them in some capacity? Across campus, ask for funds for Acme, and because they fit within the mission and some of those kinds of things, money goes, they got a grant. And then lastly, properties. Let's see, which one do I want to highlight? Turn to, let's do 29 and 30. I'll go over a couple of these. So Seville, Spain is the southern portion of Spain, which at times has been nearly completely Muslim. So depending on what part of, there are times throughout the late Middle Ages where even the Catholics were not just a minority, but were just a tiny percentage of those who would even generally claim, the Christian kind of label within southern Spain. So there's not even buildings. So this they gave money to help this church be able to purchase a building in Seville, so they can begin to have a consistent, regular worship spot. There was one place that had 11 separate buildings in the last 2 years. From I forget if it was Iran or Iraq, that had been moving around, and that was because they lost count at something like 11. The blessing of having a building is just enormous for the regular life of the church. And then go over to the next page on page 30. So All Saints up in the Northwest in Washington was able to purchase this old church to have a building, but they're a young church plant. They have no money as far as whether it's getting it back up just simply to code, or whether it's getting it into a space and remodeling it. Because I mean, you guys look around this area of churches that are even if we moved in, the amount of money that it would take to get it back up to usable space or adding on or those kinds of things is tremendous. So, for them to have a jump start of some kind of being able to invest in this building, therefore invest in this community and be a light in that place, is one way of which ACME funds go out. Okay, so there's something from kind of every category. And then you've got last couple of years of grants are just mentioned in the back. Yeah, feel free to take them. If you want to take more, that's fine. Any questions before I close out? Yeah, Will? Okay, yeah, so to become a member of the fellowship, they ask, because it's about churches and they're congregational, for the congregation to approve it in some kind of way. So it's something like, if this is something that our church wants to be a part of, I mean, as simple as someone making a motion and us voting on it in a business meeting would work. If there needs to be lots of other conversations along the way of saying, okay, if we're going to bind together with some of these people, let's ask other questions about it, those kinds of things. But essentially, the congregation approving it in some form or fashion, so that when we fill out the application, we can say, Crosspoint Community Church approves. We're in together in being a part of the association. Yeah, their board will ask questions about that from that point on. Yeah. All right, anything else? All right, if you have any other questions, grab Greg, Alexander, me.